This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon. This week, the Enjoyer ran one of my favorite stories by one of my favorite people. My friend Amber Harris told the story of her own Hillbilly Elegy, from the trailer parks of Oakland County to the edge of Oakland University, before her mom robbed a bank and her dream was shattered. Amber's story was inspired by J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy. The book was hotter than fire in 2016. Eventually, it catapulted Vance to the U.S. Senate representing Ohio, and now to a vice presidential run alongside Donald Trump. Amber was annoyed by critics of the Vance book, including Detroit News columnist and my former boss, Nolan Finley, who took offense to Vance's use of the word hillbilly. Rather than seek out false notes or false offense in Vance's story, Amber Harris found herself in its pages. Whether it's people in the Appalachians wrestling with drug addiction, or a mom in suburban Detroit looking for love in all the wrong places, these human struggles shape and change people's lives. Most people don't make it out to the other side. If they do, they've barely survived. What's rarest of all is to see someone who's overcome the wiring and the programming of their youth. Amber Harris has been blessed to do so. When you read her story at enjoyer.com, you might think Amber is some kind of professional writer. You would be shocked then to learn that this is the first story she's ever had published. You'd be horrified to learn how her relationship to writing and the pen became so tortured. And we'll talk about that too. Amber Harris is proof that we are better than our worst days. And if we pray, we're bigger than our worst trials. Amber, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Enjoyer Podcast.
Thank you, James.
Amber, we'll start you off with an easy one. We start everyone off with this question. What do you enjoy about Michigan?
Oh, that's an easy one. I like that. The seasons. I really love the weather, ironically. And it's my home. It's my home.
Yeah. Now, Amber, we're having you on because you just had a great story. I think it's probably the most interesting story we've published in our 1+ month of existence. Your Hillbilly Elegy in the wilds of Oakland County. What have you heard from people who know you, who've read the story? What are they saying?
It's been really shocking. They've come up to me and it's been humbling. They're like, wow, I never knew you experienced this. You never show it. You always have, yourself carried pretty well. They're like, we just never knew that about you. It's a beautiful story. And I always shy away from those compliments. I'm like, but I'm kind of leaning more into them. Like, thank you. Because telling it's not easy.
How did you come to write that story for us?
So I love the Detroit News. I do. It's a good syndicate. So I was perusing one day the app, and I love Nolan. I do. He's great. And
yeah, he is great.
He's great. And I was just getting back from the RNC, and I was excited about Vance. I was there. The energy was great. And I opened his article, and I'm reading. And the first paragraph said, like, mine and Vance's story is very similar. And then by the middle, it was like, it's nothing alike.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. And I started taking offense to it because my story is, I wouldn't say it's worse than his because I think that's speculative, but it's different. But I found his coping mechanism of using the word hillbilly, because that's what he viewed himself as, and reshaping it as a power move, whereas Nolan viewed it as I don't know if he was projecting his opinions about how he feels about the word. I think that's what it was. He was projecting his opinions of the word.
Sure.
And I think that the power of accepting that word was more powerful than rejecting it. And I just let it be known.
What did you find when you read that book? What did you find when you met J.D. Vance inside the pages of Hillbilly Elegy?
I found a humbling young man. I really did. I found this scared child who overcome that laziness, that complacency that you get when you're brought up in a field of chaos, that
right,
and neglect. It's really neglect. It's not
right.
It's chaos, it's neglect. And to rise above being neglected is huge, because it's a lot of self-discipline that you don't find kids having these days. And it was inspiring to see that. And he did it at a very late age. I was very, very young when I realized, like, I'm on my own. He was, he was in high school that he turned it around. I was in, fifth grade when I was like, I gotta get good grades or I'm screwed. He was later in life, and that was after those patterns are already developed. It was very impressive. So that's what I found.
Do you think it's easier to do it when you had to do it, or maybe when you have a little bit more of your faculties as a teenager? Like, you've experienced one and you've read about the other. Which path do you think is preferable?
Probably earlier on, I'd say, for
Why?
sure. I just developed study habits. I was able to get up in the morning and push myself at an early age. And I think that as you develop more of the couch potato syndrome later in life, it's just way harder. Even today, as an adult, to not have those disciplines, you find it in everyday culture. So I think earlier the better to develop those habits.
Why did you develop those habits? Why didn't you just become your culture? Like they say, we like our environment shapes us. Why didn't your environment define you?
That's a really good question. I was stubborn. I was
You've not outgrown that.
No, I haven't. I was faced with a lot of like, you can't do that. And I would be like, oh, watch me. Yes, I can. And so my mom would constantly be like, you're not an A student. And so then to prove her wrong, I got straight A's.
Why would she say that?
The one instance that comes to mind, I was upset that I got like a C on a spelling test or something. And it would be her way to make me feel better. She'd be like, oh, Amber, you're not an A-B student. You're not an all-A student. Like, why do you care?
Oh, so it wasn't like any attempt to denigrate. It was almost, kind of a consolation. Like, what more do you expect, right?
Right. But that mindset, I don't know. I was like, no, I am an A student. Now I will now prove it to you. Like, I'm mad for a reason. We have to fix this. But she was never a mom to help sit down and study with me. So I just had to study myself. And to get into that habit, it worked itself out.
Was it yourself? Was there some, teacher along the way who maybe, gave more than they might normally have? Like, who helped guide and shape the path?
And that's another difference between JD and I, is he had his Meemaw.
Yeah.
And I didn't. My grandparents, who I love, oh my gosh, my grandparents were my solid foundation. They were very complacent in a lot of the problems. And my mom, they were complacent in either the drug addiction or the constant ceiling that people put on themselves. Well, you can only get this high.
Right.
And so I didn't have a leader. I think that makes me really isolated. And we were always moving so much that even developing friends and relationships with teachers was really non-existent, unfortunately.
You were like a military brat, except without the discipline that comes with having parents in the military.
Yeah, something like that. I almost wish I could go into the military like he did. But instead, I forced my brother, after raising him, to go into the military, and I'm living vicariously through his,
It's a maker of men, right?
I think so.
Your mom all but plays a character in this story. I mean, she's prominent. Her decisions in love, her financial decision to rob a bank, all these things that affect you, and then later we see her kind of rebirth and rebranding as a reliable grandparent.
Yes.
What'd your mom think about what you wrote, and did she remember anything differently than perhaps young Amber did?
I feel so bad about this too. So I do have to admit, I didn't tell her at all about writing. And then yesterday after it was published, I go, oh, Mom, by the way, I'm about to post this story. And she looks at it, and she was on a Zoom meeting. She's like, oh, I'm in a meeting, I'll read it, and I'll call you back. And then she calls me back, and she goes, wow, that was really raw. And then my mom, starts crying. And I felt so bad. And she's like, no, it was really good. It was amazing. I want you to continue this. This is amazing. But she's like, it's just hard to read.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, Mom, I could go way worse. I'm not going to. But no, she has made something of her life. And so I did, after I posted the story, had to do a shout out to my mom. Like, she is a great grandma, and she is trying to work through her demons, and we all are. So, but I did drop the ball in telling her, and I was like, oh, that was bad. And then I can't stand when my mom cries. I mean, like, that's just sucks, but she's good now.
What kind of tears were they?
Just like one of those, like, where you're trying to hold it back, but they just come. They weren't like, and I was afraid because my mom for the longest time would, well, this was just her way of dealing with life, would minimize it, right? When she got out of prison, or no, for the first 5 years, she did a 10-year stint. For the first 5 years of prison, she'd be like, oh, I'm getting out soon. I'm getting out soon. And she'd be like, oh, if I just had a better lawyer. Oh, if I just had this. And my grandparents would go along with it. Oh, she just had this.
It was always someone else's fault.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I told my grandparents, I'm like, no, she needs to get better. She needs to realize her error in her ways. And then the last 5 years was, oh, I'm going to improve this. Oh, I'm going to do this when I get out. And her tune really changed. And yeah, so it was just, she was very defensive of herself for the longest time and trying to defend her actions. And I was afraid when she read the article, she would kind of regress back to that way. And she didn't. She said she's not going to listen to this podcast, though. this particular episode, I'm spreading the Enjoy Your podcast everywhere because I love it. You guys are doing a great job. But she was like, I might just skip that episode.
No, she should listen. I mean, it's and what I find interesting is that she is supportive. Yeah. She's supportive of what you're doing because, from what you've told me, every adult in your life has not always supported your writing.
No.
Now tell me that story about how. I mean, obviously, anyone who reads your story sees gifted writer, and especially when when you realize that it's your first story, then you're like, well, how's she so confident in her writing, right?
Yeah.
How's she so conversational and raw and real? Like, who can just do that? Oh. But you've had this pent up for some years now, because you were turned away from your pen. How did that come to happen?
So I was really blessed at an early age where I would submit writings when I'm talking like second grade. When I was 7, my mom was pulled aside by my teachers saying, Amber can write. You should put her in a camp. So I remember going to a camp between, husband number 1 and husband number 2. She was still married to Jim, and I was normal. I'd call it normal. We lived in the trailer parks, but I was normal. And so I went to a writing camp, and I remember going into 4th grade, and writing in Florida was very coveted. You had to submit writing tests. And again, I excelled in 4th grade, and I always kept a journal. And so right about the 4th grade, 5th grade school year, I would write a journal down, and my mom's, this is going to get real hillbilly, my mom's boyfriend at the time, Miles, who we were living with, would go away and visit his daughters every month. And during one of these episodes, my mom brought her first husband to visit us in Michigan. And
Jim.
Because
Don't mess with Jim.
She was doing this, I don't want to let you go, but I don't want to commit to boyfriend number 2. I just want to have my cake and eat it too. Maybe I made a mistake with husband number 1. Maybe Amber needs a normal life. There was a lot going on in this year in Florida. I told you in the story, it was like 50 years. Every day was a new episode of something, and I was learning. And I was learning to not trust anybody, but I was learning in life. Holy cow. So Miles leaves for New Jersey. Jim comes in. This is over like Christmas, New Year's break. So I am digesting.
Over the holidays.
Over the holidays, yeah. Yeah.
That's family time.
Bring Jim back because he was family number 1, right? Let's have some security because this will be the second Christmas in St. Augustine. The first Christmas we spent with the new life with Miles. And then now we're in the second year. So I am digesting this all in my Spice Girl journal. And I wrote a very, elaborate, Jim was here, he brought his daughter, and it was like a normal family. And I put it in my Monopoly box and put it above in my closet.
It wasn't like it was like on your bedside table, just face up, there to be read.
Right, turn to the page.
Right.
No, I hid it. I was very cognizant of my surroundings. So I hid it in this Monopoly box, and I come home from school one day, and the house is ransacked. And I am now pulled into this unfaithful argument, right? What were you doing? What is this I found? I found this, and I'm just flabbergasted. And my mom's in tears and shambles. There's, I don't know, red marks on her. I'm being grabbed and shaken and said, what is this? And my mom's like, tell him it was a dream. Tell him it wasn't real. And I said, it was a dream. It wasn't real. And my mom's like, you can never write again. So I didn't.
It was your mom who said that. So she's come all the way full circle then to now be supportive.
I don't know. Maybe.
And it's incredible that then and now these writings center around her because our mothers shape us. Mine certainly shaped me. I'm podcasting right now in her basement of the home in Southfield that she bought 15 years ago, technically for herself, but it turned out she was really buying it for me. My mom was an amputee who bought a 3-story, 3-floor home. Not the easiest to maneuver through.
Huh.
She didn't buy it for herself. She bought it for me. And I just can't imagine having any kind of when your mom does pass away, you will regret things that you'll regret the time you were scrolling through your phone while you were at at Meijer together. That you didn't take advantage of those small moments. And so that's with as loving a relationship as you could want with your mom. What is it like to have a more tortured relationship? I can't imagine it myself.
There were times where, and this is going back to JD's book, where when my mom was in prison, I didn't have to worry about her. She was in a place that I didn't have to worry about. She wasn't overusing drugs. I mean, we can go into that time where she was abusing drugs and drinking alcohol and all but dying. And I didn't know where she was. Nobody knew where she was. And she was doing check fraud and didn't know if she was going to be in prison or not. So when she went to prison, it was just finally I can be myself.
A relief.
It was a total relief. Total relief. So, tortured, yes. Now it would be sad for my kids.
What relieved you? Because it also derailed your ability to go to college, so it wasn't all good.
I would have derailed my ability to go to college to know that my mom was safe. It was that she was safe and not harming herself or couldn't harm anybody else. I mean, at that point that I dropped out of college, it was more focusing on Nick. It was all about Nick. Right. My brother was brought into a already abusive relationship between Miles and my mom at the time. And after my mom gave birth to Nick is when she became addicted to pain pills. And so Nick never had that loving nuclear family. And so when he was 6, it was just all centered and focused around him. So she couldn't hurt my grandparents anymore by her lies. She couldn't hurt Nicholas by the abuse. She couldn't hurt me, even though I built this shell of a person. She couldn't hurt me by her bad decisions. I mean, yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack there, but we won't.
What I find fascinating is also your relationship with St. Augustine.
Yeah.
You have this year there that felt like 50 years as a young woman, as a young girl. And you still are going back to this day. Has your relationship with St. Augustine changed, or have you come to get some kind of comfort?
Yes.
How do you like a place that much stuff happened to you?
That's a great question. I think that I went back to deal with my trauma from that place, and I fell in love with it. I went back there as an adult, and I went with my now husband, but then boyfriend Matt, and he booked this vacation with us, and he's like, "Hey, where do you want to go?" He's like, "I'm thinking St. Augustine," and he said it.
He said it.
He said it.
So, okay, so this was 99, 98, 99 the first time.
So we're talking
and about when
2014, 2015.
Okay, so like 15 years later.
Yeah.
And it's your husband who brings it up, boyfriend at the time.
Yeah.
Were you open to it, or did you have to be talked into it?
No, I was like, okay, let's do it. And we went back there, and it was the most amazing vacation between the two of us. And, you know, surprise, surprise, oopsie, Grayson was born from that trip. And so, like, you think
Grayson
it's weird.
Augustine, right?
Grayson, it was, to look back on that, though, it was a rebirth of a really traumatic experience in my
Literally.
life. It was. And so after that time, we've gone back, and it's the boys said this is their third time there. And during COVID, my COVID lockdown, I never submitted to anything. I was not going to be locked down in my brain. So my
Hell no.
30th birthday, I was like, we're not doing this here. I booked an Airbnb in St. Augustine. We went down, got an amazing deal on the beach. It was the best time ever. So there's this rebirth happening from the trauma of that 50 year period of time, my 9 to 10, that I completely rewrote the narrative to. And I wrote this story and created it and crafted it and edited it in St. Augustine to get it here.
That's incredible.
And so it really is to think that. I never really put those two together. So I'm really, that's good. I love that. That makes me
Well, and it's also fascinating that you discovered it as a kid, and now you have kids. Yeah. One kid, whose origins are in St. Augustine, but now they've both come to enjoy it. And it sounds like you get to show them a different face that they won't have to overwrite someday.
Yes, and maybe they'll know the story one day, but I don't ever have to show that and expose them to that necessarily.
That's not your St. Augustine anymore.
No, I rewrote my tragedy at St. Augustine, and that's the place where Matt and I feel like is calling us now. So we'll see where it takes us, but I love St. Augustine now. So I took it away from Miles. I took those bad things that happened to me away from the bad people in my life. So
yeah.
Now,
you did write a great personal story, but people should also know Amber is one of the most gifted political minds in Michigan. Former executive director of the Oakland County Republican Party. She just was with the Sandy Penciller for U.S. Senate campaign. Like legit Politico. And I have to ask, as a legit Politico, as a fellow resident of Oakland County, what the hell's going on with the Oakland County Republican Party?
Oh, you don't
having Kwame
Kwame
Kilpatrick as the guest speaker at Lincoln Day? Can I just tell you that L. Brooks Patterson would have never, ever? What is that? I'm not holding you responsible, but I do want answers.
Oh, you don't. A lot of people are actually like, why'd you leave? It might be because you left. That this is happening. I do. And
so this is in a way blamable to you.
From my trauma, from my childhood, I will take the burden on of this issue. I really will. I'm like, I should have never left with CRP. But I still love them. I'm still going to get people to that dinner.
You're going to the dinner.
I don't know. I really don't.
Tell me you're not going to the dinner. You're going.
Honestly, I don't know. Because there's so much happening in this next 5 days to go to that dinner. Like, I just can't wrap my head around it. That's next week issues. I'm still on this week issues. But I'm interested to hear what Kwame has to say. The narrative spun behind it is that he's a rehabilitated man. And we need, as Christians or as Republicans, we need to forgive the sins of yesteryears, embrace the new change of a man, and apparently promote him.
I was going to say, I must have missed where Kwame had asked for forgiveness. I think that's an essential part in giving it. But, it sounds like you're not totally out, though.
I do want to hear him. Aren't you interested in hearing what he has to say?
I'm not interested in hearing what Kwame Kilpatrick has to say.
I've never listened to him speak.
Unless it is outlining a payment plan to make the taxpayers of Detroit whole. After your arrearages have been addressed, hey Kwame, we'll even have you on the podcast, bro. I'll send you a Make News Local Again shirt. We'll get you taken care of. I don't know if they make them 4X, but we'll get Kwame a shirt once that were to be addressed. But until such time, it just makes me feel like this is another pander to people who will never support. There will never be meaningful support. Like, that's not going to do it. Who is the Kwame Kilpatrick voter in 2024?
I think that we're trying to figure that out. I think that it is some sort of racially motivated handout. It has to be.
Right. I mean, it's not because he's the best person to get Republicans over the hump in any way in 2024, right? I mean, so if not that, then what? Then pandering. To who? For what? Like, who are these people who wouldn't listen to Republicans who, don't cheat on their wives and don't, end up defrauding their cities?
Right.
But they need a guy who's been to prison to tell them that? Who is that Republican?
There is a staple of Detroiters who do still like Kwame. They're out there. And will Kwame get those people to the polls for Donald Trump?
You're not totally out on this. You are somewhat interested in this.
I'm intrigued. I am. You can tell, though, via the internet sensation about this story, that the old guard of Republicans, they're not having it.
No.
And those old guard Republicans are the people with the money.
Yes.
And so there's this constant power struggle we're finding in Oakland. And don't get me wrong, it's not lost on me. This isn't lost on me that we are further alienating our base.
Yes.
But at what cost do we alienate the base to gain more voters? When the base is going to vote for us no matter what. We can piss them off. They're still going to vote for us. But how do we get new voters? And I think that's this crossroads we're at, especially in Oakland. I mean, I'm telling people, and I'm wanting to focus on Pontiac, Ferndale, Royal Oak. And that's what we need to do as Oakland County. And that's what I tried to do as executive director. And there's no good answer besides just showing up. And I think that's what they're trying to do with Kwame. They're trying to meet people where they're at with somebody that experienced the system, albeit he was a problem in the system, but still a product of the system.
Well, and he has the Trump connection. I mean, he didn't just fall off the turnip truck. He's obviously internationally known, which is why it was such a big deal. Maybe it will work. I'm not Karnak here. I don't know everything. It just seems odd to never, ever do anything that attracts the base. And, we get this cavalcade of Amber Rose and Kwame Kilpatrick. And what bothers me, I think...
We already have the base.
What I think bothers me is the tendency, and strong communities don't do this, right? If you tried to convert to Judaism, they would say, okay, oh, you want to be Jewish? Cool. Why don't you study it for 2 years and then we'll talk? What Christians tend to do is say, oh, you're a new Christian? Let's have you give the Sunday sermon. We invite people to sit in the seat of honor without any reason to think they've changed. And I think at some point we're due for a conversation about what do we get out of it? What do we want out of it? Do we even know that we want something from this?
I think we're so desperate for acceptance.
That's it.
Yeah.
Desperate.
We're desperate. It's a Hail Mary at this point, especially in Oakland. But we're just not doing the work we need to. And I'm not shy about telling that to the leadership, which is probably why I'll never get my job back.
Well, we're on to bigger and better things. We'll get you out of here on this one. 2024. We now know all four candidates. I know who I think you'd like to have win in November. Who will win and why?
You mean at the top of the ticket?
I mean at the top of the ticket.
In Michigan or in total?
Girl, the presidential race. We are talking about the 2024 presidential race.
Well, I don't think he's going to win Michigan. I don't think Trump will win Michigan. I do think he will win the presidency. I don't think that we are doing the work we need to I think that Michigan is ripe for a change. I think that it is ours to lose, and we will lose it because the work's not being put in. I think that there's a disconnect between the way things used to be and the things that are now happening, and the people that need to be at this table just aren't getting to the table. And I don't think they necessarily want to be at the table together. I think that Republican politics in Michigan is so polarized that they'd rather see the Dems win at this point, and that's on both sides of the Republican aisle. But I do think Donald Trump will win in America because I have more faith in Americans not falling for the beloved sweetheart Kamala Harris than the media gives us credit for.
Awesome. Amber, is there anything else you would add? Anything else you'd have people know about you or what you do or anything?
I don't think so. I appreciate the opportunity. I didn't mean to cry. This was the first time I've actually really told my story. And so a lot of it going back in my memory and those emotions are so raw because I haven't experienced them and I haven't told them. And I don't know what this is going to look like on the Enjoy Your podcast. It's a great podcast.
They've been suppressed. Yeah.
They have. And so I appreciate the opportunity for the voice, but I really just want to circle it back to JD because this is what it was all about. It wasn't about me. I don't want it to be about me. I'm blessed. I have been absolutely blessed. I've been blessed to meet people like you. James, you're great. And a lot of people in Michigan who are trying to make a huge difference. And I want to be part of that difference. I don't want to necessarily run for office. I want to be behind the scenes making that difference for people like JD who have changed perception. And so somebody today was like, JD brings nothing to the table. I said he brings a heck of a lot to the table. He wrote a New York Times best-selling book that was made into a major motion picture with Glenn Close. And you don't think he brought anything to the table? That is absurd. Now you have Hollywood and the media doing a whole 180 because they're scared of that. They're scared of that Hollywood promotion, and they have to do that suppression to win.
Oh, I mean, JD was just on the Sunday shows. That will never happen again.
Yeah.
He did too well.
Yeah.
That will never happen again. Where he gets to do 3 in one day? Never.
No. He's amazing, and he brings so much to the table, and that is what I wanted to highlight with my story. As being a millennial myself, I'm 35 years old, he speaks to a whole lost generation, a whole lost, neglected, in some instances abused generation that just wants to feel like we can do something and then do it. So back to JD Vance. He's a great VP pick. Totally love Trump, and I think that I think it was great.
Awesome. Amber, thank you for being who you are. Thank you for lending us your gifts. Thank you for your time today, and just thank you for being a fellow Michigan enjoyer.
Thank you.